this is Khansa from Accelergize and your host for the InfoproSeries, an initiative driven by a global network of publishing platforms. Collectively, these brands engage a broad B2B audience across technology, business ideas, and thought leadership, delivering high-impact, industry-focused content worldwide. Hi everyone, this is Khansa from Accelergize, and today we are joined by Andrew Stevens. He's the Senior Director of Enterprise Digital Product Marketing at Quadient. Thank you so much for joining us today, Andrew. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Could you briefly walk us through your journey and what has shaped your perspective on enterprise digital product marketing over the past 25 years?
Yeah, thanks, Khansa. It's great to be here and to talk to so many people through this broadcast. My journey is almost an accidental one, really. I started in banking as an IT graduate, and I was working for a very, very large international bank. And they very quickly realized as an IT graduate that I couldn't add up for particularly well. I wasn't great with numbers. And when you're working on the core banking platform, that's a bit of a problem because everybody's relying on your ability to do your maths in order to get the numbers right for the bank. So they put me on a little team called Statements and Advisors, who were in the middle of creating a brand new design of a statement. And I really found my little niche there. I worked my way up until I was leading international teams across the world in IT on the subject of communication platforms, customer experience platforms. And in that role, I spent a lot of time working with what was referred to within the bank as propositions leaders. So business leaders creating financial products, that sort of stuff. And my job really was mostly to translate the technicalities of the systems that my teams were building into something that really works for the business people to understand and for their customers as well. Ultimately, I guess it was my first introduction to the fact that you can have a product as good as you want, but if you can't talk about it, if you can't deliver a message, it means absolutely nothing. I ended up spending my last 3 years at that bank working on the operations side of the business, sort of as a hub between business leaders, marketing leaders, and IT leaders. And then I got a call from Quadient. That was the first time that I actually realized that what I was doing was product marketing and sitting at the nexus between sales, R&D, marketing, operations, and all the other different teams and helping people to understand everything with a core message. So I joined the company. I worked with some real world-class product marketing leaders here, eventually being given the privilege of leading the team to do with customer experience management products myself. In terms of what shaped my perspective, it's a tricky one. I think for me, I come from a world where it doesn't matter how much people say we just need a simple message, or we need that message to be simpler and simpler and simpler and simpler. It's just not an option. Everything that I've done has been in complex industries where nuance is everything, where the ability to talk in detail is just as important as the ability to give that high-level message. It has helped me to realize, actually, that while we try and dumb everything down to be a really simple one-line message, our customers are also really intelligent creatures. They get that there are things that are that benefit from having detail, that benefit from having nuance, as well as having a high-level message. You can't manage without a high-level message. But they don't need that dumbed-down message. So I think that's what's really shaped my perspective over the years, is working with both colleagues and customers who have all been generally very, very clever and really just get the fact that the one-line message just doesn't do everything.
Great. That's a fascinating journey, to be honest.
An accidental one, but ultimately one that I've enjoyed.
Yeah. All right. So from your experience, Andrew, what differentiates high-impact enterprise product marketing today from what we saw even 5 to 10 years ago?
Good question. I think if we look at the core of product marketing and product management together as a combined team, there's 4 questions that they solve as a group. Where's the world going? Which problems within that world should we solve as a business? how do we solve those problems with new products? And then how do we get those solutions into the hands of our customers and make them sticky? The third one, definitely a product management piece. The first two and the last one could be argued are really, really product marketing. With that, if we take a look at where the world was, I think you said 10 years ago, it was a much more level place. We were out of the financial crisis. Mm-hmm. Economies were relatively stable. Yes, we got fintechs and martechs that were trying to invent new products. Ultimately, though, they were just trying to find new ways of solving existing problems. If anything, blockchain was the really big thing at the time, and that wasn't really anything big. It was a solution looking for a problem. But what that meant was that product marketing naturally got closer to the demand generation teams in answering that final question. How do we get our solutions in the hands of our customers and make them sticky? There was less need to worry about where the world was going and how it was changing. It was going to be roughly the same tomorrow as it is today. Bring that forward, though, to today. Everything's changed. We're in an unstable world, unfortunately. We have an economic outlook that is slightly less certain, certainly in some regions. Digital, which was a really big thing, is just now the table stakes. If you haven't got digital, you're gone already. AI is emerging. It's a real game changer for enterprises. And with that, there's potential massive resourcing and operational model changes coming in soon. So a lot of the product marketing teams that have been focused very much on the demand generation side, on what is the message and how do we get it in the hands of our customers for so long, are needing to shift their thinking back towards those first two questions. Where's the world going? And which problems should we solve? Effectively, we need to get our crystal balls out again and gaze into the future about how tomorrow's problems are going to be substantially different than today's problems. And that muscle hasn't been used in a while by a lot of product marketers. So the really high impact teams are the ones that have trained back really, really quickly to peak fitness on those areas. And they're now looking to drive the whole business, not just the marketing teams and the sales piece at the end of it. I guess that's where I'd look at that massive difference there is which product marketing teams are driving marketing and which ones are driving the whole company.
Well, that's a really interesting perspective, I must say. So how can organization balance accuracy, compliance, and customer experience without compromising on any of them?
I think that's a really simple thing that we do. We treat each of them, accuracy, compliance, and customer experience, as fundamental truths. They aren't items that need to be balanced as though we can pick and choose. They aren't ones that actually cause problems for each other. They're not ones where, as we push one up, the other one will naturally come down. So we've got to find a happy medium. We tend to think that they are, though, because we've got different technologies for each of those areas. And we've got different teams for each of them with different KPIs and different processes. And in many cases, the teams, the technology, and the processes don't help each other out. You end up in a position where you've got individuals fighting against individuals to meet their own KPIs, rather than actually that in an ideal world with a decent solution across the company where they actually are fundamentally different. We can treat them as the same areas. And the way we solve that is through simple common sense. I'd love to say that it's a genius level intellect or anything, but it is just common sense. We find technology that helps us to communicate accurately and compliantly in a way that enhances the customer relationship at every single touch point. And then you think from that customer first position in every case, which forces you to actually rethink how you set your organization up and all the different silos that exist today in the business. And often the best way of doing that is to actually forget about what you do today and think about what it could be like. What would happen if the customer experience team weren't just sat advising, they were able to update the personalization of every single communication directly from their customer journeys that they own? What happens if legal and compliance have access to the communications, and they could actually make recommendations directly into those communications for the teams to make changes to, like they can if they were reviewing a document in Microsoft Word, for instance. What would happen if you actually had a platform that guaranteed the accuracy, that made sure that there were controls around things so that a rogue communication couldn't go out there? What happened if there was one single platform handling all of that? What benefits would you get from all of that accuracy and compliance if you can now also talk with a single unified voice of the business? When you think about it that way, it doesn't sound that remote. It only becomes a problem when we go back to the way that the teams have been set up historically. So we've got to be willing to change the technology and the teams, and that will naturally change. You'll end up with a position where you can be accurate, you can be compliant, but you can also enhance the customer experience at every touch point.
I completely agree. I feel finding the balance is so important. Yeah.
It's a balance, though, for me, that isn't a balance in the middle of the scale.
Mm-hmm.
It's a balance that should be right at the top of the scale.
Right.
There's absolutely no reason why anyone should have to settle for second best.
Yes, absolutely. So when we talk about digital transformation in large enterprises, what does getting it right actually look like in practical terms?
Well, I guess we should probably talk about what it doesn't look like first.
Okay.
It doesn't look like self-service at the expense of in-person. We've done that.
Mm-hmm.
If as a business you're not already there yet, you'll be well on your way to seeing all of the pains that come from it. Just prioritizing self-service in order to reduce resources everywhere else. You've taken the single finest ambassadors for your business, your staff, those frontline people, and you've replaced them with a web screen or a mobile app. And because digital was always expensive, that probably means that the web screen, it looks and feels the same for every person that sees it. It's impersonal. It's inappropriate for people that aren't digitally native. It's almost identical to your competitors, with the exception of a logo and the color choices. And it's exactly the opposite of approaching that friendly face who can deal with you as an individual when you used to walk into a store, a branch, an agency, whatever it was, and you've got a problem and you knew that there was someone who could actually fix it in the ways that you need. In effect, what we've done with digital transformation in the past is tried to create one size fits all. And in doing that, we've created one size fits nobody. Even when we think we're advanced, we've got journey orchestration. We can push people to the next best action based off what they need, rather than just treating everyone the same. The reality is we're still on rails. Right? We're pushing people down one of 3 tracks, perhaps, instead of one. And generally, that's something that only gets done in the pre-sales marketing part of the journeys anyway. As soon as you've bought the product, you're back into a single track journey with no decisions in it for the servicing aspects of the customer life cycle. The future, though, of digital transformation practically, for me, is making every interaction look and feel like there are still 2 humans in that process, not just one. That means understanding the history of the customer, understanding their context, their needs, what their limitations are in every single situation, and then dynamically building a plan for them that meets their needs, not just pushes them down one of 3 or 4 predefined routes and ignores the fact that none of them really do what the customer really wanted, or that the customer came in with 2 problems at the same time. But because it was a generic system, they've just got to solve one of them, because there's no way of solving 2 problems at once. The problem is the world's tried that before, and it's failed. But the game changer this time is that the computer's really starting to think for itself and think properly now with artificial intelligence. Once we've cracked AI hallucinations, which are still a big problem, we'll start to be able to have these interactions digitally with every individual, and to treat them as just that, as an individual, because we'll be able to personalize everything to the point where we understand the customer and we can tailor what's shown for them and what they need to do based off their needs and also the limitations. There's absolutely no point me showing someone who's in their late 80s a fully digital screen without some sort of guidance. At the moment, they don't get that guidance. Whereas actually in the future, it won't be that we've got to program it in, it will be that the system will just understand it. And ultimately, that's where we're spending a huge amount of time and effort here at Quadient as well, in making sure that everybody can be treated as individuals like that in the future.
That's great. That's a great way to frame digital transformation.
Yeah, you'll hear the theme throughout this conversation, I'm sure, but it's about being customer-centric and human-centric, not about being business-centric and process-centric.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, governance and architectural alignment often get overlooked. How critical are they in ensuring long-term success of enterprise initiatives?
They're two slightly different things in the future, I think. They're starting to diverge, but then come back together at certain points. Architectural alignment, let's take that one first. That's becoming less about deciding your own technology model within a business and more about working out where everyone else is developing. So as an example, I know I only look 21, but I am old enough to be trained as a COBOL developer. The old green screens on mainframes. And thank you for not laughing when I said I was 21. Okay, it was too late. You did laugh. You were very polite until I prompted it. But yeah, I was a COBOL developer when I first started at the bank. The company that trained me could still be training COBOL developers because they think that COBOL is the way to go forward. The problem is the software they're buying isn't written on mainframes anymore. So they'd be limiting their ability to move forward as a business against their competitors that were buying those latest pieces of software where they got a full choice of the latest technologies. Ultimately, they'd fall behind, they'd collapse, the decision would be taken for them, and they'd have to make a big old investment and make a lot of changes. The same holds true for more modern things like the cloud. Right? There's a lot of perceived risk around it in a lot of areas still, even though the reality is that it's rarely a problem. But if you're still aligning your architecture around being wary of the cloud and being determined to be everything within a single data center, the number of technologies that you'll get to pick from in the future is going to dwindle until the decision's made for you again. And you have to either collapse as a business or put a huge investment effort into a radical change. Right. So from an architecture perspective, it's critical that architecture isn't just looking at the platforms and the interaction methods, which is historically a large part of architecture, understanding how different platforms work together. And it's becoming much more than that and starting looking at supporting the business's needs in the future. You mentioned governance as well. Yeah. Governance is a huge area. We could go in lots of different directions here. I guess let's focus on the elephant in the room, though. It feels like it's becoming more of an AI thing than ever before for governance of AI. As I talk to our strategists and our customers about things, they all want to know about security and safety and governance of AI. For me, that means two things. Governance of artificial intelligence and governance within artificial intelligence. If I take the latter first, the governance within artificial intelligence, it's critical to trust the results that are coming out of the platform, right? Bottom line is, if you say, what is 2 + 2, and you're not quite sure whether the answer's right, you're never going to be able to move forward.
Correct.
That means having a good governance layer that sits across all of your artificial intelligence and puts the real guardrails around what it does, what answers it gives, how it explains its decisions, and how transparent it can be. Really hard to move forward in the future, where AI is going to be a core part of the long term if you just don't trust it. So we've got to get over that problem, and governance is going to be a huge part. And for the governance of artificial intelligence rather than governance within artificial intelligence, this is where architecture starts to come back in again a little bit. It's about thinking long term about what your IT estate is going to look like. Think about today's enterprise world specifically. You've got thousands maybe of IT products are in there. It's unmanageable at the moment, and organizations are trying to consolidate down on more, especially in the world of communication where we live. At Quadient, they're trying to consolidate on fewer and fewer platforms. Imagine though if you've got those thousands of products, and every one of them has its own embedded AI in it. As a business, you've got a voice, not a voice per product that you own. So you've got to train every single one of those thousands of products to meet the same standards, to work the same way, to do the same things, to give the same output in terms of the conversation that it's having, and give the same results ultimately. Even when you're in the tens of products, let alone the thousands of products, that becomes completely unworkable. You're using AI to replace your IT team, and then you've got to employ another IT team twice as big to be able to control all the AI that you just used to replace your IT team. So the governance helps you to avoid that AI sprawl. At the moment, we're with AI slop. It's going to very quickly get to AI sprawl where there's just too much to control. And an architecture and governance will come together and say that we should be buying and using products that interface with a central set of AI platforms instead. And that way, you've only got to keep one or two AIs trained, and you go back to that single voice that you can talk with, rather than having things that potentially are going to be completely rogue and do different things.
All right, that's very insightful. So at Quadient, communication and experience solutions are central, I mean. So how enterprises evolving their approach to customer communications management today?
Okay, yeah, so that's another great question. At Quadient, we're very proud to lead the world when it comes to customer communication and automation of communication processes. We help ultimately our businesses globally to connect with their customers and do so in a fully automated but fully personalized way. And what we're seeing in the world, I have to say, is a fundamental shift in communication and experience thinking. And it's about time too, I have to say. Goes back way back in time to the root cause of the problem. Communications were one of the very first things to start to get automated. As computers became a thing and they really were room-filling mainframes, we started to create reporting platforms, the sort of things that could churn out printed reports and then statements and pre-printed correspondence, those sort of things, way back in the 1970s, replacing the original secretarial pools with computers and printers. And then over time, as communication has advanced and more channels have been added, communication products have evolved as well. Usually the way that that's worked is, as email became a thing, as an example, the company bought an email platform because they didn't equate the print platform with the email platform. And then when SMS became a thing, you know what, we'll buy an SMS platform. And then Department 7 over in the corner didn't like that SMS platform, so they bought their own. And then digital came along and said, well, we need something that can do a few PDFs rather than just print. So we end up with another platform there. And then digital say, actually, we want HTML5, we want smartphone push notifications, we want all those wonderful things. We're going to control all of that. And then marketing came in and said, you know what, we're going to have our own platforms as well. Servicing said, no, we're sticking with our own. So you end up with this massive mess of communication proliferation, really. Compare and contrast that, your CRM platforms. Ask anyone to name their CRM platform, and I bet they'll be able to name it. And whatever the name is doesn't really matter. The fact is they will be able to name it, one of them. You ask them to name their communication platforms, there's probably 10, 20, 30 of them. Now, As enterprises have realized in recent months and years that product innovation is getting much harder due to regulations tightening things up and due to customer demands coming together, the differentiation that drives customers to your business becomes the relationships that you can create. And you do them through the critical communication touch points. So we're seeing that real shift in buyer behavior. That's effectively the long story to get to almost the punchline is people are now seeing communication platforms as their critical limiting factor. And that's because it doesn't matter how hard you try to improve your customer experience, you can't do it without updating your communications. Up to 80% of your critical customer touch points come in a written form across a physical or a digital channel. So if you're doing the bits around the communication platform, you're only an absolute maximum of transformation of 20%. So people are looking to really try and improve those different areas. Really working with Quadient to help use our technology to reimagine the way that customer communications should be. So they're all real time, the way that customers want them today. We think of communications as being batch things, high volume, overnight things. Customers don't want to wait overnight. Customers want something that is real time, it's in the moment. They want them to be truly digital. A PDF is not a truly digital communication. It's a digital representation of a piece of paper. It's got an address at the top and a signature at the bottom, the way that we used to do it. A lot of customers now are wanting micro communications, individual messages that are just fired straight to their mobile phone or to their email. It just tells them a very small thing. Doesn't need a big load of preamble and a big load of bits at the bottom. They want them to be more interactive so that they can actually send information in and then have a process run and then a communication come back out again, rather than it just being a single isolated outbound communication that exists in a vacuum. And ultimately what businesses want is for things to be customer first now, rather than process first. Every communication actually adding value rather than just adding cost in terms of output. But with that, I have to say that the basics remain exactly the same. You want to get the right message to the right customer on the right channel at the right time to enhance the relationship. It's just how we do it and what context we put around it that changes, so that we can deliver that single voice of the business, not a single voice per channel or per department based off what channel specific platform that they're able to use that limits the business and lets the customer down. That's the fundamental shift that's taking place there.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. So, with the rise of AI and agentic workflows, how do you see AI transforming enterprise operations, particularly in areas like finance, compliance, and customer communication?
Yeah, it's going to be a big transformation, but it's going to take a while to get there. We've already been through two great automation waves in the last 100 years or so, probably less than that. So if you look back a little, first automation wave was when computers became a thing. I mentioned, getting rid of the secretarial pulls and the ledger creation, all that sort of stuff in finance, having manual accounts and manual books. And then, of course, the second one, much more recently, when digital computing power and the cloud really took off, where we were able to actually start to automate a lot more customer-facing process. What we got left with, and ended up still being manual or human first, was the really, really hard stuff. The stuff that just didn't naturally fit into an if-else statement in a computing platform. That's where AI is going to be the game changer here. Those solutions to those problems aren't out of reach at the ridiculous cost that they used to be anymore. The problem, and the reason it's not there today, is that I always think of AI as a little bit like skydiving at the moment. It's undoubtedly very, very exciting. Yeah. There's always that risk that something's going to go wrong and cause you a lot of problems. Not a massive issue in reality today. But that's because the fear of skydiving effectively is putting most people off. Or in other words, most AI today it's actually being used as staff augmentation, productivity gains by maybe automating recommendations, letting a human have the final say and improving productivity by 10%, 20%, 30%, maybe even a little bit more, but ultimately it's still fully human in control, and the computer's just turbocharging things a little bit. As that evolves, though, over the next few years through human in the loop to human on the loop, eventually into the self-improving autonomous platforms, the speed of change is just going to be limited by that governance topic that we talked about earlier. I'm not jumping out of any plane until I know that there's no wind, that I'm wearing 5 parachutes and 2 reserves, that I've got an expert holding 3 more that's diving with me just in case none of mine open. There's a 100-meter wide bouncy castle at the bottom that I can land on in case none of those open. And ideally, the plane's only 5 meters off the ground in the first place. I want all those levels of security before we're really going to trust AI for things that really matter. So at Quadient, we're putting a lot of focus on how we can be that backbone of trust in our future AI capabilities, so that organizations that can't afford to just get it wrong even once always know that it's going to be right. So without that, AI is going to remain heavily limited in the business environment. It's one thing using AI for marketing, which is great. You can personalize a lot there, but you might get a bit of an odd result. You've got to send a correction email out. We've always seen those, right? The correction apology emails. Whoops, sorry, we shouldn't have sent that. It was a test email. Or sorry, the rate or the start date was wrong on that particular communication. Here's a correction. Bit embarrassing. That's all right, though. We can get away with it. It's another thing entirely, though, when your AI insurance agent sends out 20,000 contracts with the wrong clauses in them, because it just decided to generatively hallucinate. Leaves you open to all sorts of legal penalties, fines, even worse, all the negative publicity that comes with it, right? We've all seen fortunately, they're usually comedy stories on the internet and on media where AI hallucinated and got something embarrassingly wrong.
Yeah.
You can't do that when it comes to a regulated industry. You can't take those risks. And unfortunately, of course, if you're in that end state, you've probably downsized your staffing anyway because AI's taken over. So you haven't even got anyone to come in and fix those problems and make the apologies properly. So we've got to get that right there before we can do anything. Once that problem's solved, though, we'll see some very big changes in the way in how businesses operate. Finance models, they're already highly advanced without generative. We'll start to see generative and deterministic modeling merging into a combination. So to really benefit things like early detection of changes. So we'll be able to track events properly and recognize changes in behavior that might require us to actually communicate more and check things a little bit more. As well as we'll see that fundamental shift in a way that individual communications are handled. We're a few years away, though, yet, from that general AI presence. We've still got to solve the accuracy and the performance issues first.
Absolutely. AI is clearly reshaping enterprise operations at multiple levels.
It is. And the better it gets, the more autonomous it will be allowed to be.
Yeah.
We've just got to get ourselves that confidence yet.
Yes.
The silly example, but you sent me some high-level notes for the interview in advance, and I wondered about whether I just did a quick test. I just threw them into an AI platform and just said, give me the answers, and whether I just read them out to you. And I just thought, you know what? I don't think I trust it that much yet. And if I don't trust it among friends in an interview like this, no bank or insurer or utility provider or energy, no government is going to risk it just yet. But every day it's getting better.
I agree. Anyway, so what are some of the real world challenges organizations face when integrating AI into existing enterprise systems?
Well, we talked about governance, so let's assume the governance problem's resolved.
Okay.
I think the real problems arrive with agentic AI.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because it's the part of AI that's really going to take the actions autonomously rather than just ask it a question, and it's going to give you an answer. The biggest problems within that, integration points are going to be a big problem. Most platforms today are made to be interacted with through beings that have eyes and fingers. Right? AI doesn't have them. It needs API points as alternatives. It's quite a fundamental shift. We filled buildings over many, many years with desks, with rows of monitors and keyboards and comfy chairs and headsets like this one to use as contact centers. Because that's how humans work. That's how humans interact with the computer. We're going to need something that looks very different in the future. Yes, you can screen scrape and sit on top of the glass with AI, but it's not an ideal approach to do it at an enterprise speed. So that's going to have to change there when you're trying to integrate. And the best platforms will be the ones that already have a huge amount of AI API points, or perhaps they're not even AI points, but they're good API integrations. Other integration problems, cost. Not cost of the AI to install and integrate, but cost to run. It's very difficult to plan for AI costs correctly, because AI is supposed to think as much as it needs to solve a problem, not be limited by a price or a certain amount of time and then get the answer wrong as a result. It's not a major problem now, but it is one where the finance teams are going to have to be really heavily involved in every big AI integration decision in future to make sure that there's real value coming out that is larger than the cost that's going to be going in. Really easy to say, AI would benefit my team. I can get rid of this entire group over here and move them onto something more high value, and that'll save me $100,000 a year. If it's going to cost $250,000 just to run the AI, keep the people there, at least until the cost of AIs come down. And probably the other one, and it's one that I don't think is talked about enough at the moment, but is starting to be looked at more, especially in large enterprises. There's a real problem where there's a tendency to buy a big platform and then bend it so far out of shape with custom scripts and custom processes and additions and enhancements and changes that it doesn't really look like the way it was supposed to look when the vendor sold it to them. And I've been guilty of doing this myself in the past in my former life. You buy a platform, you follow the 80-20 rule, you say, well, 80% of it works, we can change the 20%. That's fine when you've got humans that you can constantly use to work around all of the little workarounds that you've put in there. But when an AI comes in order to integrate properly and control those platforms, it's going to have to learn by reading the manuals. It's going to have to learn that this platform actually doesn't do what it's supposed to do in all this documentation, and that we don't have the same level of documentation on how to control all these strange scripts or processes that have been put in place around it. So we're going to start to see some real challenges around AI integration, specifically agentic AI integration for those platforms, and probably a change in buyer behavior where there's a push for people to buy platforms and use it for the purpose it was intended, rather than keep trying to extend it and extend it and extend it. Because that way, if it's just being used for the purpose it was intended, you can train the AI to integrate with it very, very easily. It can control it without any problems, rather than potentially causing a whole host of problems in the future.
That's an important point. All right. So where are you seeing real practical impact of AI in enterprise workflows, especially in communications and operations?
Yeah, the practical change right now, the big one is in helping to reduce the skill and the experience required to communicate accurately and effectively. It is just a start. It's getting stronger every single week and every month as the communication industry evolves and people get more and more comfortable with AI. But right now, that's the core benefit that I think that will be most noticeable by the people listening to this interview. Think back to the contact centers we just mentioned. We use them as an example, but also the back office processing sites in lower cost locations. they are filled full of people who are dedicated to customer service. They've been employed very specifically for their ability to talk to someone or to respond to someone on a chat, whatever it might be, and solve their problems. Their customer service skills are trained to the very highest level. But it's very unlikely we employed them for their ability to write a communication, even though they've got to do that a lot to confirm that the action that they promised that they would take for the customer has been taken, or that the process that they've been asked to follow requires them to communicate at a certain point. In many cases, we didn't even employ them for their ability to spell correctly. And yet they're being asked to communicate and be that front line in a written format for every customer. So AI being able to monitor those communications being generated, to be able to suggest things, to summarize things, to recommend sentiment or tone changes is incredibly helpful, and it's improving engagement across the board. If you might be someone who has come in from a pretty technical background, you're working in customer service, you're really good in computers, you're good at writing this sort of technical documentation, but actually you've been asked to write something that is going to welcome someone to a brand new account or a brand new policy. Your technical explanation of it might not be very useful at all. AI is able to come in and say, thank you for that. I understand what you're trying to do. Now let me recommend how we might want to word that so that it doesn't take up 17 pages with 14 clauses. It only needs 1 page. And we use some slightly more informal language so that it's more appropriate from a welcome message. And actually this bit in the middle, we can summarize this down to 3 lines. And as a result, you've improved the productivity because people will learn over time as the recommendation keeps becoming, maybe I shouldn't have written that much, but also the customer benefits because they're going to receive something which is deeply meaningful and personalized in a way that they can understand it. Ultimately, it gets you back to that single voice of the business. It stops you from having a position where you've got 1,000 people in your contact centers and back offices, and you're talking in 1,000 different ways, potentially for the same thing. You get back to that one single way. The other area that I see a real benefit for is language translation. Enabling businesses to really meet the customer where they are, rather than trying to force them to translate into a country's native language, where they may miss something important. Or perhaps the country has multiple native languages, but in the past, it's just been far too much of a burden to generate communications in every single language. So you just pick 1 or 2, and that's the sort of thing that I think we can see a real difference coming into in the future. In that, ultimately, though, like I say, same outcome: a better customer experience, a better employee experience. And that engagement becomes critical in the future more than ever before.
All right. So in your view, what separates organizations that successfully convert demand into revenue from those that just generate leads?
Yeah. So I'm going to be a blunt one, I'm afraid. Every business should only have 2 core metrics: revenue and cost. If you've got departments that think that they don't have a direct line into those metrics, or they think that just by doing their thing, it's someone else's responsibility to deliver on those, you're going to struggle. And there are a lot of organizations in the world right now. There's no perfect organization, but there are a lot of organizations in the world that are like that. They're very silo focused. The businesses that successfully convert that demand into revenue are the ones where the marketing team recognizes that the job doesn't stop just because they hit a number of leads. It drives all the wrong behaviors. You can end up with people trying to game the system. They're amending the scoring rules so they generate more leads according to the platform. They're delivering poorer leads as a result. Or they're actually feeling quite defensive and they're trying to make sure that the marketing team can claim specific opportunities as their own that are high value, even though they might have been partially generated with a different department. And you end up with teams fighting about who generated the lead, when actually the job hasn't been won at that point. You've still got to close the deal. You've actually got to go in and actually make the money out of that customer. As soon as your number of leads becomes the target, stops becoming a metric that you can trust, because people are going to try and find ways of hitting their target at all times, rather than it being a good metric of a partial way through a process. So the best marketing teams, they're the ones that sit right with the sales teams collaboratively, day in, day out. No handoff, more a general production line where both marketing and sales touch each opportunity throughout. Yes, in very different quantities, depending on where they are within the marketing and the sales journey. But there's never a point where somebody throws something over the fence to another team and then chalks up a win for their team and just says, right, someone else's problem. If you can get to that point, you know you're well on your way to turning that demand generation into really good results, because you'll be working with the sales team to improve collaboratively rather than just fighting for your own metrics.
Yes, and I feel that that distinction is incredibly important.
It's a rare one, I have to say. We all like to think, at the highest level, of course, we're like that. But actually, when you get down to the floor where people are working, and you talk to them, and then they'll tell you the right thing, because that's what they're supposed to say, and then carry on asking them questions. And after a while, they'll tell you what's really happening. And in many cases, they're a long, long way away from where they need to be. But it's not. I wish I was telling you stuff that I'm sure no one has ever been thought of before. But the reality is, implementing simple common sense is often the right way to solving these problems.
Absolutely. So, over the next 2 to 3 years, how do you see enterprise demand generation, customer experience in AI converting to reshape go-to-marketing strategies?
Enterprise demand generation, customer experience, and AI.
Yeah.
We've got three different things there. You've got a process, you've got an outcome, you've got a technology. So we should make sure, I think, to start, we don't naturally conflate them. I think what we'll see, though, is the customer experience, the outcome, becoming much more important. The way customers interact with their business becomes the differentiator once everyone's digital. AI is going to help that. So AI starts to help define the outcome. It's going to turbocharge those critical communication touch points. It's going to help organizations to automate everything, but in doing so, keep a human-centric approach rather than that one-size-fits-none situation that I mentioned earlier. But it'll also do something that we've not really touched on yet. It's going to help to increase the speed of product development, which ultimately means that we'll end up with fewer laggards in each group and more of a mass of really good products that customers can choose from with very similar functionality, because you'll no longer need the massive IT team that you once had in order to catch up quite so quickly. And that's where I think that's going to drive the go-to-market strategy, because the experience that you get from the companies you'll work with today is going to be the deciding factor in who you work with tomorrow. We'll see fewer product-focused messages in our go-to-markets, fewer things touting innovation, because as soon as you've touted it, it'll be easier to replicate that with AI-powered R&D teams across your competitor group, so it's not going to be a sustainable advantage. And you'll get much more of a brand-first approach that pushes the relationship, the experience, the positive emotions generated by working with that company. I think that's probably going to be the biggest change that you'll start to see in go-to-markets, is in what is that message really going to be that differentiates.
Totally agree. So, also, and if you had to give one piece of advice to organizations looking to better align demand generation, customer experience, and enterprise technology, what would it be?
Goodness, it feels like I've been spouting unintended advice for the last goodness knows how long that we've been talking. But if I could only give one piece of advice, start with understanding your customer and work backwards. Understand their needs, their pains, the things they'll enjoy, where their limitations are, and then solve those problems by picking the right enterprise technology. It starts with the outcome, works back into the technology, and then goes into the process. So don't fall into the trap of trying to work out which teams that you've already got are going to run that technology, or which parts of it they're going to be controlled, or which KPIs they need to have. Ends up with a process first thinking rather than customer first thinking. Focus on the experience you're generating with the products that you're selling and the way you're supporting the customer after the sale, not just on the revenue generated. And then, as a result of that, define your demand generation plan around the experience. Don't assume your customers are dumb. Don't assume they just want the cheapest price. We've got statistics all over the place, right, for many years now that have proven that the experience is essential and that customers are willing to pay for it. Now, anyone who's got an Apple phone knows it's not the cheapest in the world. They've not got it because it's cheap. They've got it because they understand what it gives them in terms of the experience.
Right.
So don't think about what demand generation does or anything like that within that process. Build the team around what the customers need, supported by the technology, rather than driven by or limited by the technology in the teams. Ultimately, if you solely differentiate based on your product and you're going to market on that with your demand generation plans, someone can catch you really easily and you'll be in a race to the bottom on price. If you've already got a great product, differentiate based off the experience that's been created. That way you get clear water ahead of your competition, and it's much, much harder a gap to close. It's much more sustainable.
That's incredibly valuable advice, Andrew. So thank you once again for joining us today and sharing your valuable insights. It was honestly great speaking with you about enterprise transformation, AI, customer experience, and the future of go-to-market strategies, of course. So we truly appreciate your time and perspective. Thank you once again for being with us today.
You're welcome. It's been great fun. I've enjoyed talking to you. Thank you.
Likewise, Andrew. And we hope you found this insightful. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow Accelergize for the latest B2B marketing updates. You can also explore and follow our 7 publications and connect with us across social media using the links in the description.